shouldn't have messed with Susan. Hey everybody, welcome back to another movie review. This is Ian here coming at you for my review of The Equalizer 2 with Denzel Washington. This is actually a surprise sequel trip. Denzel is not one to revisit a lot of his films. In fact, this is the overall 50 of his acting credits over the last 20 years or so. This is his first sequel, at least that I can see out there. And you might want to ask what changed that, what would make him revisit such a role. This is obviously one he has really enjoyed. This is his second venture. You've got Denzel also returning with the original director from the first Equalizer. That's Antoine Fuqua. So before I jump too far into this, of course, got to give you that early warning. There are going to be spoilers here. They're going to abound. So if you're waiting to see this somewhere else, if you're waiting to catch it on some other time, or you just want to go out and catch this with family or something, you've been warned. Otherwise, we're going to get right into it. So we pick up on a train heading to Turkey. Of course, still following the story of our Robert McCall, and really out on one of his vigilante missions. He has not stopped doing this since his gig at the hardware store. If you remember back at his home in Boston and his battle against the Russian mob from the original film. And here he's at it again with a trip. We're not really too sure what everything's about, what are the circumstances, but we quickly find out he is trying to retrieve a bookkeeper's daughter. This is not just a guy that loves books, but he went out of the way to help his local librarian and ends up cleaning house right from the get-go. No reprieve, no rest there. So things take a bit of a curveball turn soon, though, as we pan over to Brussels, Belgium, and there's a pretty horrific murder that takes place in the home of a CIA operative tied to Robert's good friend Susan, that we remember from the original film. But this really sets the tone for the rest of what we're going to see in the film. Instantly set me wondering how come Susan's circle is being targeted. What's the rationale behind that, and what's the reasoning? Now, all of that being said, I'm honestly a little fragmented approaching this review because of all the different fragments we get in this film. On the one hand, I think this can be approached through the various cases that Robert McCall, handles, through the different people he helps, all the different instances. You can look at those, or you could really just focus this through the lens of Susan and her circle. I think it leans more towards the latter, but that's the biggest difference that I'm seeing between this film and the original, is how much it's telling. How the story isn't as quite bullet line direct as the original was. We dabble in a lot more things here. And it's important to note that that's not just for the plot lines. That's also for a lot of the questions still surrounding Robert's past here, the moral questions of being an asset, working as an assassin, sort of his past catching up with him, if you will, and what that's meant in his life and everyone surrounding him. But it's still, that's not something to get too tangled up in here, because at the end of the day, this is not a movie that is out to make a long-ranging philosophical debate. This is an action film down to it, though you do get a chance, I think, to see a little bit more dimensionality in each character. So Robert himself has been trying to live a low-key life, trying to really stay out of course, the limelight. He's supposed to be dead, though there's only really Susan and her husband technically know that he's actually alive. But really, we've seen him really become a watcher here, a real watcher of lives, instead of just remaining only cloistered into himself. His sort of outlet, being a Lyft driver, gives him a chance to become that casual observer at large. This is a guy who isn't necessarily jumping in everybody's life and trying to give him a self-help session or something like that, but he does get a chance to really hear people out, even if it's interacting on a small level. And if there is something that does manage to catch his attention, that does pique his interest, and needs some rectifying, he'll do it without hesitation at all. So it seems the main interest he takes, though, is in a local kid that lives in his apartment complex. He goes by the name of Miles, played by Ashton Sanders. You might remember him from Straight Outta Compton for 2015 or The Retrieval in 2013. But long story short, he is really artistically skilled, but he's starting to get into the wrong stuff. He's getting mixed in with the wrong people. And Robert McCall sees this and really sort of takes a chance to kind of counsel this kid from afar, encourage him instead of things he could be doing after school or bad stuff he could be getting involved in or getting involved with the drug trade, to instead do some things to kind of clean up the apartment complex, to put his art skills to use. And when he sees him slacking off of that, man, he puts him back in the right track quick. That was actually one of the best scenes of the movie, to be honest, in my opinion at least. That he during one of these episodes, Miles ends up going into the crack house, and McCall just breaks in, takes out, at least knocks out the guard detail up front, and with two guns in hand, takes Miles back and really gives him the choice, the ultimatum of being a killer, and wasting his life, or doing something productive. So, well done scene. Obviously not just for like the teaching aspect of it, but it was just solid in its impact and in the way that delivers. So, on the one hand, we've got these all these snapshots, these vignettes of McCall and his life in Boston, what he's dealing with. On the other hand, you've got this constant theme developing, if you will, and I think this is the device that's used throughout the whole film here, is this figurative and literal storm brewing. As I was noting a little earlier on, there's a really terrible murder that happens in Belgium, and soon Susan's office is investigating this. So as she starts to dive into details about the murder itself, there's a lot that seems off, and noticing that the pieces don't seem to align for this just being random or a random break-in. It's something that's very targeted and direct. So on the one hand, as a character who was really just in the background during the first film, we really get a chance to see more of Susan and her husband, to see a little bit more just the day-to-day, how they work. These aren't just retirees who are sitting around reading. They are very active in government service and solving all kinds of crazy cases worldwide. So this comes to a head pretty quick, though. Susan herself is targeted, and she's murdered, and soon those same detail and those same sources are coming after her husband as well. Now, there's a certain irony to this, because earlier in the film, this sort of makes its kind of all over the place nature. Susan actually manages to pay a visit to Robert, really trying to help him and just tell him to make peace with the passing of his wife, Vivian. If you know anything, remember about this character, this is something really key that he's been really just stuck on. Not stuck in a permanent grieving way, but something he refuses to forget. He part of the reason he does what he does is he knows that his late wife always saw the best in him and his propensity to help others, and of course he's doing that now to an extreme that I'm sure she never would have imagined. But I mean, here it is. It's still something that he struggles to fully come to grips with, and he obviously still hasn't made complete peace with his wife's death. And just as he starts to think about doing that, just as he starts to think about making his way back from that, he gets the notice that Susan has been killed. And of course, now it's pretty personal, and he directly involves himself, in this. You could say, well, everything else has always been personal. What he's done too, in the situations that he's chosen to interject, but this really takes place to a different level. This is someone that, again, only two people on the earth are supposed to know he's alive. Someone who purposely keeps people away, does not keep friends or anyone else close, and doesn't have a next of kin or anything like that. It's just him. And to him, this is the same thing as losing a family member. So as he sets out, starts solving this case, and he's really just observing everything that's gone on, he does catch up with one of his old colleagues. That's Brian. They were both in special services together. Of course, Brian's believed Robert McCall to be dead for years, so it's a huge shock when he actually does see him when they do meet up. And this is really the one person, because McCall's taking a huge leap, really just even revealing himself this level to anyone. But this is the one guy he trusts, believes he can trust, and goes to confide in. As he starts putting the pieces together, things slowly turn into a pretty nightmarish realization as he visits Brian's home, and everything comes full circle. It hits. Brian is not distant from this case at all. In fact, he is right in on the middle of it, and he was the one that dealt the killing blow to Susan herself, which is just nuts. So this is one of the failings, in my opinion, at least. I was immediately interested in what was the motive for this inside work. What's the motive for such an inside job like that and these kind of murders being done? And honestly, it really seems it just comes from a sense of disillusionment by Brian. You get a really direct moral conflict with Brian obviously being on the side of the fence that their missions, the way they killed for God and country, all of that it's all just collateral. It's all just another mission. None of it really matters morally. There is no good side. There is no the enemy side. It's just sort of they had targets and they did it. It's just all a bunch of hooey. And this was a chance I think to dive in and explore something deeper, like what I think the movie like Mission Impossible 6 is going to do just next this next coming week. I don't know. Maybe they're just looking to let MI6 steal that floor, but this falls a little flat. I really think there was a little bit more chance to explore this motive-wise for not just Brian, but for his entire team, the three other rogue assets, to really just flip a switch and just start taking vengeance against their employers and against the very country that they work for and that they killed in the name of. And just in terms of motive and everything like that, I question that. I mean, what was the event that flipped the switch? What was the event that changed everything, or was it even an event? We don't really get that in this film. That's kind of unfortunate, considering this is one of the closest windows we get into Robert's actual past and who he worked with, who he associated with, what were like his squad mates like, things like that. Obviously, Robert gets caught up right in all of this, from an actual assassination attempt on him to this very group targeting Miles and those that he has grown close to, which leads up to an epic special forces showdown. So, where you have, I think, what you're supposed to have with this film, which is, I think, solid, really crisp, well cut action. It's there. One thing I really do appreciate about how all the scenes are treated here is the action is so crisp and cut and done in bursts that you don't have any awkward long linger or just violence for the sake of gratuity, if anything. And I can really appreciate that. I think there's some scenes that just get ridiculous in some movies for the sake of being so, or Mortal Kombat style bloodbaths, but it fits. It fits here, and it's about the type of force and speed you'd imagine from people with this kind of background and this skill set of what they do and what they actually deal with. So that was solid, and that was well done. The use of the literal and figurative storm throughout the whole film as a device to guide things. I think that's a pretty obvious one on the wall for a lot of people. You don't have to dive too deep, I think, to see meaning behind that. So that really stays on a pretty superficial level. The sound is where it needs to be. The score is nothing memorable, but the exact thing you need for an action film. And most of all, something I'm going to commend here is the tension, the atmosphere of tension. In reviewing this, I can't help but think of Death Wish, which was our other sort of freewheeling action film we got a little earlier this year with Bruce Willis. And that was one that Chris and I had sat down to do. And I remember giving that one about roughly a 7 at the time, I believe, 7 or 6.5. But I kind of look at the two side by side, and I really think this is the film that does it better in terms of action, at least the way that was paced and where it went. I think overall, Death Wish was the one that had more of an overall overarching theme, whereas this sort of inverted that. You had a lot more of the sub theme play, yeah, but less of the overarching stuff. So at the end of the day, where does that leave all this? Hey, in my book, this is going to land a solid 8 out of 10. I enjoyed this, and I really like the first Equalizer movie too. So I say that without rose-tinted glasses, just looking at this for what it is. The sort of unfocused theme really wasn't enough to sink this one for me. It was enough, if anything, to sort of get more of those snapshots of Robert's life, Susan's life, others around him, and which does leave the door open potentially for an Equalizer 3. The ending of this is nothing completely conclusive. You can see this ongoing, and in fact, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if this became a trilogy. For those of you who might not know, The Equalizer was a TV series back in the 80s, and it had a pretty good run. Started in about 1985 and ran for 4 years. So the setup could well be here for that, and I'd be shocked. I've never known Denzel Washington to take place in a trilogy, but this fits him, and I know that's easy to say about any role that you see him in. Is a really solid, commendable actor, but this is one that he specifically seems to enjoy, and that I enjoy too. So, hey, if you're looking for your dose of an action flick, maybe you just want to get out there and check out something before Mission Impossible, I say this one's your ticket, especially if you've already seen the first film. So do yourself a favor, go check this one out too. Fun ride. All that being said, thank you so much for tuning in. Stay right here locked into this channel for our remaining coverage of San Diego Comic-Con, our upcoming show, other movie reviews, all that good stuff. Until then, take it easy. Hey people, thank you for tuning into this episode and taking a listen. If you like our content, if you like what you're listening to, or anything we go over, hey, please, we would not only love to hear more from you, but if great if you could throw some support. You can subscribe right below. Also, you can toss us a line anytime. That's ksawmedia@gmail.com. Of course, you can tune in for our channel anytime for movie reviews, game reviews, a lot of random wacky stuff. Who knows what you'll hear. And of course, our episode each week where we're bringing the nerdiest things we can find, dig up, and maybe not find. Maybe the stuff that just drops in our laps. But anyway, hey, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for listening. We hope to hear from you again later. Take care.